Hey guys, it's Ornlu, and I know I did my most recent 1v1 Arabia tier list only 6 months ago, back in December of last year, but, well, the meta has changed a lot. Arabia itself as a map has changed. Like in the official version, it has gone from being with more like sparse, tiny forests and no cliffs to having cliffs again, thicker forests, in general being more reflective of Age of Conquerors Arabia that some of us played back in the Voobly days. On top of that, we have Dynasties of India now. We have 3.5 new civs. And people have been asking me to update my tier list, and honestly, I feel like there has been enough of a change to warrant an updated version of this video. Before I get into this, obviously this is all just like my opinion, man, based on my own experiences playing and casting high-level players and just all of that stuff, so feel free to let me know what your experiences are with these civs and with Arabia these days in the comments. It is the bread and butter of AoE2 after all. Second, I am still recovering from COVID, for those who don't know, so I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit off. I'm gonna just try and power through this as best I can. But with that out of the way, let's get right into this. Just like I did with the last one, I feel like the balance of Arabia is good enough these days that really we're not looking at a massive range in terms of like the best civs to the worst civs. It's still very, it's still definitely noticeable, don't get me wrong. But it's not like the old days when it's like, okay, you have S tier civs and then, F tier civs. So really, I don't think there's anything worse than C tier, but what I did is I split A tier and B tier because otherwise we'd just be looking at two tiers that have like, 20 civs in them, and that's not really the most helpful thing in the world. There are a lot of civs in the game right now. There are 42 of them. So just to quickly go over the tiers, S tier, the very best civs, you're going to see them picked in tournaments whenever possible. A tier, the civs that you're going to see picked in tournaments when the S tier civs are banned or already played. A minus tier, you see these civs a lot. You'll see them picked in tournaments pretty frequently, and you will probably see them played on ladder a fair bit as well. B tier civs are solid options. You might still see them in tournaments based on like what the player's preference is or like what the civ draft is looking like, that whole sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into tournament civ picks, but even just for what you're playing on ladder, they're still totally viable. It's just a matter of being able to leverage their strengths, and maybe they're having a bit more exploitable weaknesses. B minus tier, civs that are okay but not amazing. You can make them work, but you really do need to think about how to maximize the strengths of your civ rather than, okay, you can just sort of autopilot into your gameplay. And then lastly, C tier are the civs that actually are not that bad, but you really, really need to lean into what they're good at because otherwise you are going to be on a one-way trip to Frowntown. So the last thing I'll say before we actually jump into the civs is that, and I'll talk more about this throughout the video, but the meta these days has evolved a little bit. It's less about like the super hyper-aggressive two militia drush, pre-mill barracks, that whole sort of thing. We still see that. It's still a totally viable thing, but we now, I think, start to see more strategies and just a bit more variance as far as Arabia goes. So the meta is going to be leaning, I think, a little bit slower than it was 6 months ago when I made the last tier list video, so that's what we're going to be seeing reflected here. That said, let's get into this. Let's get to Aztecs, and let's get to S tier. I mean, is it really an Ornlu tier list video if I don't immediately put Aztecs in S tier? I don't think so. It's Arabia. It's still fundamentally an open map. It's an aggressive map. All of these things that I'm talking about are nuanced. So yeah, you can still go for any sort of aggressive strategy with Aztecs. They have a good matchup against like almost every single civ, or at least not a bad matchup. In fact, I can't really think of many matchups where Aztecs are like not favored. You have a great economy. You have great military options throughout the early to mid game. You've got the Eagle option, you've got the Archer option, Spearman, all of that being produced more quickly is quite nice. And your monks being super great in the mid game helps you a lot versus cavalry civs. Especially in feudal age, it's very much dominated by the skirmisher, because skirmishers counter everything except scouts. And what Aztecs as well as Mayans and Incas have access to is they have access to the Eagle Warrior, obviously. and that is an anti-skirmisher unit that you can make without needing to build a stable, because you need to build the barracks anyway, unless you're Khmer. You just have that building there for you, and it's even a very good anti-skirmisher unit at that. And that is just a really important tool that those civs have, and one of the many reasons that you see, especially Aztecs and Mayans, picked so often still in the current day, even if the meta is a little bit slower. There's still plenty of feudal age, and then you get to Castle Age Aztecs still able to apply lots of pressure. Bengalis, a new civ. Oh boy, new civ, so exciting. S tier, no, C tier. Bengalis are a fun civ. I really enjoy Bengalis. I like this civ. I just don't like playing them on Arabia, and I don't think many others do either. Similar to Spanish, you live and die by your unique unit, your Rata. Yes, they're good. They can be really good, in fact. They're not that expensive. They have a lot of hit points, a lot of flexibility with the unit. The issue is you need to get there, and even then, Rathas can still be countered. It's not like it's a super broken OP unit. It's, in fact, weaker than a Cav Archer, it's weaker than a Knight, but you get the flexibility, and that's really the strength of the unit, but you need all those upgrades, and yeah, not having Knights is an issue. You don't really have any military bonuses to help you out when you're going for things that aren't elephants. Dash was barking. What was I saying? So, Bengalis, you don't have Knights. That's a huge, just gaping hole in your tech tree. Knights are just such an important part of the game. Your elephants are good, but they're slow. In Arabia, it's an open map. Your trash is not very good whatsoever. Your skirmishers are mostly fully upgraded, it's true, but your halbs miss the last armor upgrade, and your light cav miss the hussar upgrade. And you're just missing anything to really make you stand out, and that's why I do think they are a shade below most of the other civs in the game on Arabia. But like I said, they're not like a D tier civ. They still have options. They have arbalests with bracer. Sure, you don't have thumb ring, but you have arbs with bracer, you have halbs, you have elephant rams, you can make it work. And Rathas, you can snowball with them. Your eco is pretty solid as well with your free villagers upon reaching the next stage, so you have options. It's not like the civ is hopelessly bad, but it's just a very tricky one to make work. Berbers are going in the B tier. So Berbers, I don't really think there's a ton I need to say with them that I have not already said in days of yore. You don't really have anything going for you in the early game. Yeah, you have your faster moving villagers, which can be nice if, especially if you're laming or whatever, vill fighting, anything like that, which is fine. But you really start to shine in Castle Age. That's where you get your knights that are cheaper, camels that are cheaper, camel archers become an option, cheaper genitors. People keep on sleeping on that unit, man. And then you're pretty much good for the rest of the game. It's just, Arabia, it always goes to Dark Age. 99% of the time it goes to Feudal Age, and then maybe 75% of the time it goes to Castle Age, but maybe even a much lower percentage is it goes to Castle Age without the game already being decided. It goes to Castle Age, but one player is 7 villagers ahead. And you just can't get that guarantee. And that's why late game civs tend to not be as effective. But Berbers are a more mid to late game oriented civ that's also super mobile, which means they're still quite strong, if that makes sense. So it's Berbers. You can still night rush with them. And at lower levels, when aggression isn't as powerful relative to people just defending, then civs like Berbers are going to really shine. Bohemians. Also going to be in the B tier. A civ that is really powerful. They did get nerfed recently, but nerfing their monks, monk rush potential isn't that big of a hit as far as Arabia goes. Nerfing the Hofnitsa, it's not as big of a deal. You still have the free gold mining upgrades. You still have chemistry in Castle Age. You can get to the bombard cannons and even Hofnitsa that more easily once you hit Imperial Age. And these are all nice timings, but you do miss thumb ring, so that's a little bit eh. Your spearmen are great, which leads to great pikemen, so you'd have a great pikeman monk siege push. Even without the cheaper monasteries, you still have free mining upgrades. So all of that's good. You're just really missing in mobility. Your stable is terrible, and you don't really have the greatest well-rounded economy. It's just so focused on the faster gold and stone income. So it's not, you don't have a super great eco, and you don't have great cavalry, but it's still totally viable. So B tier for Bohemians. They're all right. Also, Hofnitsa are still insane, so if you get to those, you just splatter everything. Britons are going to be in the A tier. In a meta that is a little bit more passive, Britons are actually going to be looking pretty good. They can excel in the very aggressive sorts of situations with their faster working shepherds, but Britons love the Castle Age, and they don't mind extended feudal age because of their faster working archery ranges. So you really just have a lot going for this civ. The 8 range means you just outrange enemy archers, you outrange mangonels, skirmishers, all that stuff. They're just a really good civ. It's true that you lack mobility. I mean, Britons aren't any more mobile than Bohemians are. The difference is Britons have a much stronger economy, and I would argue that because their power unit is just your basic archer, which is already sort of a powerful meta staple unit, like that just sort of catapults them into being in that higher tier. You just can work so much with the civilization. Usually, if you can just wall your base against enemy cavalry raids or anything like that, you should be set. Late game can be really scary for the civilization with your just sort of slow push of archers and stuff. But you do need to keep in mind your lack of mobility, and that is and always has been the weakness of the civilization, that siege rams. It's Britons, it's nothing too crazy, but still just a very powerful civ, especially if you have good micro, which I do not. Bulgarians, B tier. Bulgarians, they're still very much a, okay, let's go men-at-arms and tower rush and crepost rush you sort of thing. They do like their extended feudal age play with your cheaper and faster researching blacksmith upgrades. And that is very good. Your Castle Age is still quite strong as well. Even though you miss crossbowmen, you can still really pile on the pressure from early on, especially with your creposts. And just, overwhelming your opponent with pressure. But if you are on the back foot, then you are in for a rough time with Bulgarians. You are a bit weak to archers as the game goes on. Yes, you have your hussars with stirrups, which are absolutely amazing. Fully upgraded halberdiers. You have your swordsmen with extra armor and the free upgrades, which can actually be very strong in late game. So you do have options, and great seed. But these sorts of things are all kind of weak to archers. And yes, you can get to siege rams more easily with the civ, but that's an imperial age. So, and you don't really have a long-term eco bonus. I mean, you have the cheaper stone cost on town centers, which is nice, but not really anything that is going to go crazy. So yeah, that's Bulgarians. Solid B tier civ. If you random them on ladder, I'm certainly totally fine with this civ, and you should be too, dang it. Burgundians, A tier. So Burgundians are a civ that they definitely like a little bit of a slower meta, because the more they can just sit back and get eco upgrades, the better they're going to, or the happier they're going to be. And players are just getting really good at working those early eco upgrades into their builds without sacrificing too much in terms of defense or early military. Yes, chances are Burgundians are going to be a bit more on the defensive, but then you can sort of burst out onto the map in the mid-game. Your Coustiers are very strong. You're getting something that is more or less equivalent to a knight with the much cheaper price tag, although you have to get it at a castle. Your late game is really strong. Yes, there's the button. Let's just pretend the button doesn't exist, right? Now, even without the button, you still have halbs, gunpowder. Hand cannons are much stronger than they used to be. Mid-game, yeah, your archer line isn't that great, but your cavalry is just so strong that, kind of like with Britons and archers, right, it sort of mitigates that weakness. And even if your opponent sort of like hard prepares for cavalry, like making camels and pikemen and whatnot, monks, Burgundians can just sit back and boom, right? Because those units tend to not be very good at attacking. And Burgundian eco is just so absolutely insane that this civ can make it work. However, I do feel like they miss out a little bit when it comes to aggressive potential, and I like civs that, like, as far as an S tier civ goes, I feel like they just aren't quite as able to just deal with everything or just be aggressive enough to really merit that top spot, but still Burgundians, very, very strong civ. People are getting really good with them too. Burmese. Everybody hates Burmese. They are the sad child of AoE. They got a change recently where their elephants now have +1/+1 armor. That doesn't help them versus archers. The problem is that battle elephants as a unit are just insanely hard to balance, because either they are too hard to get going early on, which they are right now, or you can get them going early on and they just become the best unit in the game because you can just make them and have like 70 of them in the late game. And the thing is, 70 battle elephants right now in late game is really, really good with, you know, pretty much any of the battle elephant civs. The problem is that you can't really do that on most maps, especially not on an open aggressive map like Arabia. And yeah, that's just leaves Burmese as struggling versus archer civs. It's what they always have struggled against. Arambai are good, and this civ is really good against melee heavy civs. Like Burmese versus Franks, I actually think is a pretty good matchup for Burmese. They have a lot of options there. And you do at least have crossbowmen with bodkin, so it's like you can go for your own ranged options in like early mid game, and that's totally fine. You have a pretty good eco. You have a very scary men-at-arms rush. It's just you have such a noticeable weakness to strong archer civs, especially in that sort of mid-castle age through imperial age thing, that it does become pretty rough. You do have the new unique tech that gives your cavalry more damage versus archers, but again, that's only in the super late game where Burmese were already fine. Byzantines are going into the A- tier. But yeah, Byzantines, they're just always a solid option. Maybe I'm rating them higher than some others would, but I feel like they just the thing with Byzantines is that they're always a viable option. Are they going to feel overwhelmingly strong in most situations? No. But they're good enough, I think, to warrant that A- tier. Towers are stronger, and Byzantines are good with this full-on aggression, forward barracks, spearmen, skirmishers, towers, that sort of thing. Byzantines are super good at that. Getting the Imperial Age faster, also quite helpful. You have camels as an option, your late game is amazing. And yeah, Byzantines just have an option for everything, right? And I think that is good enough to warrant them a spot in the A- tier. I would prefer playing Byzantines to Berbers, Bohemians, or Bulgarians. I feel like, just compared to those three civs, as just an example, Byzantines have, I would say, more well-rounded matchups and are just a bit more solid at all stages of the game. Celts are also going to be in the B tier. The meta is not really, I think, that favorable to them. You really just have, okay, let's try and get to Castle Age and do our Hoang style push, because if you are on the defensive against a lot of civilizations, you are going to struggle. You just have kind of crappy archers and kind of crappy knights, and your infantry is pretty solid, your siege is quite strong, but those are really your only options, and yes, it's backed by your strong economy, but you do feel a bit more limited with this civilization. Late game, if you're just spamming Woad Raiders and Halbs and all that stuff, then you're off to the races. Champions, of course, can also work in certain situations as well. Heck, even Longswordsmen can work with this if I've done it, and if I can do it, you can too. It's just a bit more narrow than I think something that we would really love to have in an Arabia civ. But, they still have all of their strengths that they've always had. Chinese, going to be going up to the S tier. Yeah, Chinese are still really good, especially if the meta is a little bit slower. Chinese are going to be happy in a similar way to Burgundians, but unlike Burgundians, Chinese also have good archers. They have camels as options. They're not really as overbearing in terms of like one specific area like Burgundians are, but you're getting that great eco with still having the great flexibility. You still need to be careful about early aggression or getting lamed. Chinese don't like either of those things, but if you can survive like the first 12 or so minutes of the game without taking any significant damage, you're probably ahead, and that's pretty good for a civ. You have a great spread of matchups. Chukonu are fantastic in the late game. You miss Hussar, which is kind of a bummer. Miss guilds even, but those aren't really the biggest of deals. You still just have so much going for you with this civ. You can go for the Knight Crossbowman play, the two main power units in the mid-game, totally fine with your good economy and cheaper upgrades. So there really is sort of a lot of flexibility as far as that goes as well. You can go for just pretty much any army composition you want to counter any civilization. True, you miss supplies for your swordsmen, so you're a little bit weaker versus Eagle Warrior play, but it's not really that big of a deal, and yeah, so long as you can just survive the very earliest stages of the game, which people have gotten pretty good at doing, and like I said, the meta is a little bit more focused on either you go up at like 20 population for scouts, maybe even 19, but you can still quick wall against that, or you go for something a little bit later and go archers, or you can just go for men-at-arms or something like that, but it's just, I think, a little bit slower. The super fast rushes, I think, are a bit less common, and those are the sorts of things that Chinese did not like, and bases are much more wallable than they used to be, in my opinion and in most people's opinion. So I think that this is a pretty decent meta for Chinese. Cumans are going to be also going in the B tier. Don't worry, the distribution of these civs is, it's going to be let's see. It looks more or less like a standard distribution. I have a final tier list on the other screen that I'm using as a reference. So yeah, it'll look like a normal distribution at the very end. But Cumans, the second TC in Feudal Age is a very, 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 very risky play. Some people can make it work, and depending on your map and if like you know your opponent or your opponent has like a slow civ, sure, go for it, why not? But you still have the cheaper ranges and stables, so you can go for a lot of aggression as well. Faster moving scouts is quite nice. And then you can go for like scouts and archers in Feudal Age quite easily because of those wood savings. It's really handy. Mid-game, you've got speedy, well not speedy, but you have essentially free husbandry. Cavalry and cav archers and steppe lancers, sure. Kipchaks are a pretty solid unit if you can get them going early on. You don't want to switch into Kipchaks in late game. I will say that. The Kipchaks are not the unit you want to switch into in late game. They just don't do enough damage. But if you can get them going in mid game, then that's where they're going to be doing well. And I will say that their weakness is that they have a very sort of conditional eco bonus. Like if you don't build the TC in Feudal Age, then you just don't get any bonus. Except for the cheaper ranges and stables, but that was a really important change to the civ, and I think makes it just a lot more viable in general. And then your late game is fantastic. Like, you just run everything over with your speedy hussars that are produced super fast, and you have fully upgraded halbs, so life's great. Dravidians are going to be in the B- tier, our first B- tier civ, and it is another new civ. Not that great for Arabia. I do think they're better than Bengalis, which people might think is like, shock. Because Dravidians have like an absolutely awful stable. They have probably the worst stable of any civ that has a stable, arguably. The thing about Dravidians is that you still have a nice set of bonuses that are tailored towards the stuff that you're good at, and those things are good on Arabia as well. Cheaper barracks upgrades and the free 200 wood gives you a lot of really scary rushes. Like, this civ is strong aggressively. The faster attacking skirmishers can be really difficult to deal with as well because, as I mentioned earlier, skirmishers are kind of like the unit in Feudal Age these days. And yeah, you're a roomy swordsman. If you can get them going, they'll shred most melee units. It's just once you run into a situation where you want to have some mobility, then things are a little bit awkward for this civ because you have no mobile options. But you have fully upgraded arbalests, halbs that are cheaper and easier to get to. You have your armored elephants, fantastic times. And I do think that Dravidians are a little bit underrated. Elephant archers, yeah, they're not the greatest unit, but with Dravidians, I feel like, okay, they fire fast enough that you can still make them work in a lot of situations. Is it a civ that I would love to get on Arabia? Not really, but I do think it is a step up from Bengalis and Burmese because unlike those two civs, the things that Dravidians can do well lend themselves to Arabia, right? Other than Navy. But like all of their land options are good. And by that I mean you have good archers and you have good like infantry. But yeah, not really a world beater civ right now on anything except water maps in my opinion. I think they really need to have bombard cannons, but that's a different story. Next up is Ethiopians, a civ that is going to be in the A- tier. A little bit surprising, perhaps. But I'm seeing Ethiopians picked a lot these days by top players. And, I mean, you get the extra resources upon reaching the next age. That's really great for a men-at-arm rush. It's nice if you're just opening archers or anything like that. You can open scouts with this civ as well. And you get to mid-game, you have your faster-firing archers. It's super strong. And then you have fully upgraded halbs in the late game. Showtells are pretty situational, it's true. But the thing is, you get the free pikeman upgrades, and you have strong archers, and archers are just really, really, really good these days. So, yeah, that just makes Ethiopians good, as a rule, right? Not like a ton to say. I mean, the stuff that this civ does well is pretty intuitive, and it's a matter of, okay, can you really make the most out of that faster fire rate? Because you have to remember, if the reload time is shorter, then if you're microing archers around, you need to be stopping more frequently, and you need to sort of work that into your your micro muscle memory. Alliteration there. So it's something that you might need to get used to, but Ethiopians are definitely just a pretty strong all-around civ, and one that I see a lot of top players saying positive things about these days. It's Franks. It's A tier. It's Franks. They're a great civ for Arabia. No, they're not S tier. They do lack a little bit of flexibility that I think would be nice to have for that top spot, but still, you can open with whatever you want because you have an early food bonus with your faster working foragers and your free farm upgrades, which has also a little bit of wood savings, which is nice. And you just have a strong eco. The cheaper castles is great offensively or defensively. Your knights are good. Your infantry is good. You have gunpowder. It's Franks, guys. Your trash is bad in late game. You don't love facing cav archers. Your skirmishers are truly dreadful. But as a nice aggressive option, Franks are totally there where you want them to be. Goths are in the C tier. Nothing really changing with Goths. You do get a little bit of an eco bonus with the loom researched instantly. You can either age up with the same villagers, same amount of villagers a little bit sooner, or you can go up a villager later and still hit feudal age at the same time. But that's really a pretty minor bonus these days. Your early militia, spearmen, whatever, those are cheaper and faster to produce, but you're just really limited with this civilization. It has its matchups where it can do well for sure, but it's just Goths, right? It's a very one-dimensional civilization. They don't really have a great economy, and they just don't have good defenses or a very broad tech tree. They can be fun to play for sure, but if you are facing a reasonably competent player that knows how to exploit the Goths' weaknesses, it can be just really hard to just stay alive as Goths because it just feels like you're behind against so many civilizations if you're doing things that aren't infantry, and you need to be able to do things that aren't infantry in this game. Gurjaras, or Gujars, as people have told me they are pronounced, another new civilization, and unlike these two sad ones, Gujars are going to be going into the A tier. They have a good economy. They have the sheep that can garrison in the mills, and you get the 2 free forage bushes. It's a pretty awkward Dark Age, but if you're able to, get around the little bit of trickiness associated with that, you get essentially a food relic that is the same amount of food generated by your sheep in the mill is the same as the relic in a monastery. It's just food and gold, if that makes sense. So that's pretty helpful to have, and you have another 250 food from the 2 forage bush patches. So that already, puts you in a good start. Then in the Castle Age, you have camels that are insanely good at countering cavalry. Your Shrivunch riders, which is how I'm told they're pronounced, which are really good at countering archers. And people love playing cavalry and they love playing archers. So you just have a super obvious unit choice against anything that, your opponents are doing most of the time. And if you start to see pikemen mixed in or something like that, you can go for your chakram throwers from your castle. Those are super good against infantry units and just everything once you mass enough of them. So it's a civ that has just so many strong choices and a, reasonably good eco, decent tech tree. You have insane armored elephants. Like, getting that extra bonus damage gives you a ton of pushing power in the mid-game, which you would otherwise lack because you're not going swordsmen and you're not going for knights most of the time, which are your, basic units that are pretty good against buildings. Kshatriyas, their unique tech from the Castle Age, is very handy if you are going for, anything. It's just, okay, you get a 25% food discount on everything you make for the rest of the game. Pretty darn good. The only thing that this civ struggles with is trash in the late game. Your spearmen are literally the worst in the game. It's the worst fully upgraded unit in the game is the Gujar spearmen. Your skirmishers, misring archer armor, and your hussars, yes, they are cheaper, but they miss blast furnace. So your trash line is just really not that great with this civ, but everything else is quite strong. And I do think that they are plenty good enough to warrant that A tier rating. We also have the Camel Scout, which can be nice in the early game. Hindustanis, our sort of new civilization, are going to the S tier. Yes, I do think we have a new S tier civ. Hindustanis have an answer to everything, and they have a great eco bonus. End of story. No, but seriously, the cheaper villagers is just An eco bonus that is useful in literally every single situation, and it means that you can consistently produce villagers while going for army. And in a world where build orders are tighter and tighter, and it just gets more difficult to just squeeze out villagers constantly while still making enough army to survive, especially on an aggressive map like Arabia, Hindustanis are just much more able to do that, and just the saved resources are nice in general. Your camels are really strong. They aren't as good as Gujjar camels against cavalry, but they are better against things that are not cavalry. So their camels are just a bit more well-rounded in general. You have a very strong archery range. You have your Ghulam unique unit, which is absolutely amazing against archers. And then you have your super good gunpowder to deal with infantry. Now, I will say that the one weakness of this civ is that you are kind of, one, relying on more counter units than, like, power units of your own, and you don't really have great answers to infantry before your gunpowder comes in, so strong infantry civs like Aztecs can perhaps run you over before then, but I still think Hindustanis are just so flexible and so strong in, like, all the different areas that you are looking for, and I do think they are just a really viable S-tier option. I don't think they're, like, head and shoulders above these guys, but I think they are among them. Huns are going into the A- tier. Huns are Huns. They have plenty of options in terms of how you want to open. You can go for early infantry just fine, archers, and then you want, mid-game cav archers, knights, all that good stuff. The only issue really is that your lack of houses does mean your walling is a bit trickier, and you're just not a very good civ defensively. And then in the late game, you're a little bit more limited than you would perhaps like to be. But, I mean, the Huns are a very, like, known quantity, right? They're not going to be the most overwhelming civ out there, but they are good at what they do, and they can do that, aka cavalry and cav archers, in most situations and be successful. So, Huns still solid A- tier. Incas, I am also going to be putting in the A- tier. I think they're pretty solid. They're kind of like Hindustanis, except they don't have the eco of Hindustanis. You have a great gold-intensive counter unit to, like, everything. And you also have a pretty decent early game with your stone discount. Your tower rush is quite good, which is more relevant these days because towers are stronger. Having the Eagle Scout option is quite helpful. Kamyuks are fantastic against cavalry. Your archer line's great. Slingers are great against infantry if that's what you're facing. So you really just have options against everything, but you aren't thriving in any one scenario. And you also can struggle a little bit against strong siege in the late game. It's not the most common thing on Arabia, but it is still worth noting. But other than that, Incas are just going to be a good choice. Italians are going to be going into the B tier. This civ, I mean, it's like the generic civ, right? Very middle of the road. It has a sort of fairly weak but generally applicable eco bonus with your cheaper age up. Very broad tech tree. Strong unique unit once you can get it masked up. And then that's it. Like, they just don't really have that many bonuses that are applicable on land maps. The cheaper university techs can be handy for, like, getting ballistics and chemistry and whatnot, but it's not the biggest of deals. And, perhaps you can afford an extra men-at-arm in, like, a men-at-arm rush or something like that, but Italians are just they're just a good-ish civilization. They're the middle of the road civ for Arabia, I would say. Japanese are also going to be in the B tier. Japanese, again, it's a very much like a known quantity with this civ. The meta isn't as aggressive, which I don't think Japanese like as much because they love really going hard in Feudal Age with their faster attacking swordsmen, going for towers, that whole sort of thing with their wood discount that you get on all your drop-off sites. And in a meta that is more mid-game focused where Japanese are weaker, then the civ doesn't look quite as good, but they are still strong enough at their aggression. They still are strong enough with late-game options. They're more focused on countering stuff rather than doing things that are individually strong on their own. But still, you have the tools you need to do the job most of the time. Khmer are going to be going into the A tier. Kind of like Chinese, they don't love, like, the super early game because you want to be able to skip out on your barracks and be greedy. But you can still go up pretty early, go for, like, very fast archers or very fast scouts. And you have the good economy from not needing to build those extra buildings, and then the farmers that don't need to drop off food. that you have a lot of strong options that are not necessarily elephants and scorpions, which is where like these civs tend to be a bit sadder, is they're more reliant on elephants. Like Khmer do have strong elephants, and yeah, there maybe are situations where you want to go for them. Probably not that many on 1v1 Arabia, but on other maps, I guess, or in team games. But still, they have tons of very strong options at all stages of the game on Arabia. You don't really have anything that's super overbearing, which is, I would say, like their downfall, but you do have just a good economy. I mean, the closest thing would be Hussars with your great farmers, but that's kind of it, and there are other civs who do that well as well. So that's going to be Khmer. Solid A-tier pick. Don't think that's going to be too surprising to too many people. Good eco and flexible tech tree. Those are generally the signs of a good Arabia civ, or just a good civ in general. Speaking of a civ that has neither of those things, Koreans are going to be in the B- tier. Koreans are focused on defending and making ranged units, and they are very good at doing that, but that is all they do. You don't really have that much of an eco bonus. You do have the wood discount on your units, which is quite handy. The free archer armor upgrades is also nice to have. But they're just a slow civilization, and one that is more suited to closed maps than open maps. They are still viable. Like, they're not awful, and I think they're better than the C-tier civs. Your war wagons are a very strong unit, even after their slight nerf recently, and you just have a lot of really strong ranged options, cheaper halbs and skirmishers and archers, nice to have. Lots of stone that you can spam everywhere. Your guard towers are sick in mid-game, and even your keeps in late-game also strong. In a world where tower rushing is more powerful, Koreans also become a little bit more attractive, but it's still not the civ that you're really looking for most of the time when it comes to an open map like Arabia. Lithuanians, A- tier. So they're not as, like, overbearing with paladins that can get, like, +8 attack and stuff like that, but they're still a very strong civ. They're fast out of the gate, which is nice to have, although, again, as I keep on saying over and over and over again, it's not as big of a deal that Lithuanians can go for such an aggressive early play. The meta is a little bit more mid-game focused, where Lithuanians are not quite as strong, but still, they are strong. If you can get those relics, their cavalry will, go up and up and up. Your faster-moving spearmen and skirmishers really helps you take fights where you want to with those counter units, because if you can get those counter units attacking the things that they're supposed to be attacking, then chances are you're going to be doing well in that fight. So it's just such a nice bonus for Lithuanians in that regard. And then in the late game, you have one of the best trash lines in the game with your super tanky, speedy skirmishers, your halbs that are fast, and that's about it. And then your winged hussars, which are really good as well. And then you have your cavalry things that you do. So Lithuanians, strong A- tier option. I don't think they're quite strong enough in mid-game especially to really warrant an A-tier spot, but I still think they're a good A- tier civ. Magyars. Gonna try and keep this as quick as possible, as much as I ever can. Gonna be in the B tier. They're a civ that is strong in early feudal age, and then in post-imperial age, and then they're kind of weak in mid-game. It's just so hard to get to the late game with this civ because you don't have that economy bonus. You can oftentimes get ahead by doing damage early on with your strong aggression, be that through scouts or men-at-arms or something like that. It's just in the mid-game, you have nothing to get your cav archers going, you just have no eco bonus, and you have to get a lot of very expensive techs for a unit that is also very expensive. And it's like, once you get to late game and you're getting like Magyar Hussar plus your cav archers, yeah, then you beat almost every other civ in the game. It's just, how do you possibly get there in most situations? You do have a little bit of a power spike in mid-game with like your free iron casting, but that's not really as big of a deal. And yeah, this is a civ that it's pretty polarizing in terms of the parts of the game it's good at. And I will say that also missing good siege can give you a bit of an issue in closing out games as well. Magyars, they're a decent pick, but ones that are more suited to like the super full feudal age aggression maps, and Arabia is just a bit more mid-game focused. Malay are going to be going into the B- tier. It's like Chinese or even Khmer, where you don't love the super early aggression, but you like just being able to leverage your strong economy. The issue is that you are pretty awkward in early feudal age, but then you also don't really have any military bonus that's relevant except for your battle elephants. And so, yeah, you lack strong mobility. You have good archers and infantry, which is nice, but really everything is all about that strong economy that you have. And, that's a lot of civs have really strong economies, but better military options and better military bonuses. So that's why Malay, they're never really a civ that's going to shine on open maps. They're much better on water maps, hybrid maps, and closed maps, where you can get to castle age quickly, and you just really sort of lean in on that faster research time eco bonus. But that's not really Arabia. Malians. B tier. Oh, Malians, how you have fallen. You still have a ton of options, but you just feel above average at most stages of the game, except in late game where you feel below average. And there are so many civs in the game right now that you need something more than that. Like, Malians, they're still good. Don't get me wrong. They're just not perhaps the most exciting civ these days. Gebettos are all right. Champ Scarls are all right. Furimba Cavalry is all right. And you have, a good economy. And the longer lasting gold mines is nice in, the super late game, or in a situation where you're getting some of your gold mines denied. So, I mean, there is more value than just, the super late game. It just doesn't really feel enough to make the civ sparkle. I want my civ sparkly, man. And Malians, they just feel a little bit generic, kind of like Italians. I would probably say that they're a bit better than Italians in general, but that's kind of neither here nor there. A decent pick for sure. You still have a very broad tech tree. You do have strong options in a lot of situations, just not the flashiest civ out there. Speaking of which, the opposite, Mayans. S tier. They're Mayans, man. A lot of the things that we can say for Mayans, I could also say for Aztecs. You can go in, get that pressure in, and then follow it up and just never let up. I just used the same words a bunch in different ways. That was weird. I'm sick. Don't judge me. The cheaper archers is nice. Eagle Scouts, again, you have a unit that kills skirmishers that you don't need to build a stable for and spend lots of food on. I mean, yeah, Mayans, they just have this steady power spike throughout the entire game until it dips over a little bit in post-Imperial Age, but I mean, you have Eagle Warriors that are amazing, archers that are amazing, and that's really all you need most of the time. It's just those things are so overbearing with this civ. That said, you still can run into some awkward matchups, and if you are in a situation like post-Imperial Age, Mayans are going to fall off the map, the 2012 Doomsday or something like that, as your late game is just really lacking. But if you can end it before then, which you can usually do with Mayans, you're going to be feeling pretty darn good. Next going to be Mongols, and they're going to be going into the A- tier. And I think we can look at Mongols in a similar way as Magyars, in that they are very strong right out the game, and then really good in the late game, and then they don't really have a whole lot in between. However, unlike Magyars, Mongols have a Dark Age bonus, and this is really important. Mongols with their faster working hunters allows them to get a really fast uptime, and also they benefit a lot from laming, and that allows you to sort of springboard into getting early damage done. Magyars have to wait until the feudal age. Unless you like punching wolves, which you shouldn't punch wolves, man, that hurts. So but with Mongols, you're able to get going a little bit faster, and yeah, you're not the strongest in the mid game, but you do have faster attacking cav archers, which we do see every now and again, and then your Mangudai unique unit, you plop a castle down, you get Mangudai going, and then you're good to go in most matchups. Your Hussars, of course, are insane in the late game. You're not as good as I would say in general with compared to Magyars in post-imp, but I still think that Mongols feel a little bit stronger and a bit smoother to play throughout a game. Maybe that's just me and my Mongol bias, but I also like the fact that the Civ has camels, so it's just another option that the Civ has. So Mongols, A- tier Civ, just a good all-rounder. Persians, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Yeah, B- tier. I mean, they have a pretty good economy, and they have a pretty broad tech tree, but they don't really have many military bonuses. You just have the extra knights attack against archers. Kamandaran can be nice in the late game, but I mean, you want to be making knights and booming and all that stuff. And sometimes that can work. Sometimes that's not what you want to be doing. You do have decent archers still in mid-game, even if you don't in Imperial Age, so I mean, Persians, like, they are good in late game, but there are also other good late game civs, and they're a civ that feel a little bit lost now, just because there are so many civilizations. It's like Persians have been left behind, so to say. They're not a bad civ by any means. Like, they're still good. It's just a matter of really being able to leverage them when they're not really about power spikes. They're more about a slow climb in power. And it's like other civs can kind of do that, but better, like Hindustanis, at least for a 1v1 Arabia. Next up is going to be Poles. Poles are going to be in the A- tier. I was thinking about A tier, but I think that A- is a little bit better. You have a fantastic economy with this civ. The folwarks are amazing. Your stone miners generating gold is amazing. It's a matter of defending your economy that's usually a bit more spread out. It's easier than it was when Arabia had like 50 forests of 50 trees each, but it's still a bit tricky. But that said, you have an amazing economy, and then you also have two amazing unique techs. You have the Winged Hussar. The Obuk is a very powerful, unique unit in a lot of situations. Just nice and tanky, shreds through armor, and is great when supported by units that have lower damage, like archers and skirmishers and whatnot. And Schlachter Privileges lets your knights just go brrrr, and that's always fun. But it's a civ that you need to be a little bit more careful in like how you do your base building, and it's just a bit trickier, and you don't really have anything that is strong against really good cav archers. Kind of like Franks, although your own, like, having strong scouts and whatnot, even getting extra attack damage versus archers is pretty nice, but it's still not something the civ loves. And I think A- is a pretty good place for them. I mean, like I said, the general differences between these tiers is very minute. That's why the color spectrum is even pretty short. The balance in this game, even between Aztecs and, like, okay, Aztecs versus Goths is a terrible matchup for Goths. That's a bad example. But, like, the difference between Chinese and Burmese is not that significant, relatively speaking. Like, I would give Chinese versus Burmese maybe a 58% advantage for Chinese, which is, you know, like a 58% chance that Chinese would win. Yeah, that's really big, but that is, like, as extreme as it gets, which leaves pretty much all of the other civs in the middle much, much, much closer. Anyway, Portuguese, also B- tier. Kind of like Italians, but the cheaper gold discount on your units doesn't feel as good. The organ gun can be helpful, not always. Faster researching tax, it can be nice, but You miss Hussar, which is kind of a bummer. And Portuguese are just more of a closed map and naval map civ, right? It's where they shine. On an open map like Arabia, yeah, you can go for Knight Crossbowman and have that gold discount, which can be, pretty nice, but that's kind of all you have, and you just don't really have that eco to back it up, and you do lack a lot when it comes to mobility, especially as the game progresses. Saracens. It's really hard to play Saracens, so let's just put them in B tier. They are a civ that have a lot of really powerful options. The market bonus is super strong and borderline broken in certain cases, along with the team bonus. But in other cases, Saracens can just kind of fall flat, and it's all about how can you use those very specific timing advantages that you get with your market use. And that is something that is like down to the player and just what sort of playstyle you prefer. If you want to go for the more camel-heavy route, you can, depending on the matchup, but your camels aren't really good enough to deal with things that camels don't normally counter, like Hindustani camels can, because there's just the extra 10 HP. But Mamelukes are a lot stronger than they used to be, and your late game is amazing. So I still think Saracens probably average out to a B tier civ, but they're one that can really, fluctuate a lot depending on how comfortable you are with them. Sicilians, going to be in the A tier. So Sicilians, they are just a good all-around civ. Your economy is pretty good with your farm upgrades lasting twice as long and the faster building TCs. Your military bonus is one of the best in the game with the units taking less bonus damage. It just means you can be really difficult to stop once you get going. And even starting with extra stone means you can sell that extra stone to get like a better castle age time. You just are a very strong civ in so many different situations. Faster building castles can be great for just castle dropping your opponent or saving your own butt if you're trying to rush one up at home. First Crusade is always dumb, but it can be powerful. And yeah, you just have a lot of options at the various stages of the game. Maybe not the most exciting civ in the world, but they do have options, and they are strong options, and I think they are certainly worthy of an A tier placement. Slavs are going to be in the B- tier. So the thing with Slavs is kind of like Persians, you kind of ramp up in power throughout the game, like other civs that can kind of do that as well. Boyars are stronger. Your infantry play can work with this civ. Your late game Hussar spam is pretty much as good as Khmer's, but you do lack a little bit in terms of flexibility and just early pressure strength, all that stuff. And your unique unit is a little bit situational. Like, none of these civs are bad, and I feel like, placing so low on the tier list makes them look like they're bad civs, but really it's like, it's just B- tier, right? It's still a decent grade. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of Slavs, right? They are good at spamming cavalry and infantry in siege, but just missing that power spike potential and just strong archer play. Spanish gonna go in the C tier. You do conquistadors, and then you don't have much of an eco bonus, and then you don't have crossbowmen. Tower rushing gets stronger, so that does make Spanish a little bit more favorable in the meta. And conquistadors are still going to wreck your face if you're not careful. Like, the last thing you should do is just be like, oh yeah, Spanish, they're so bad, and then just like not even worry too much about conquistadors, and the conquistadors will just kill you every time. So like, you still need to be careful about this civ, but they are just very limited in what they can do on Arabia. They're just a civ that thrives more on like maps like Nomad, or even maps like Arena and Black Forest, or team games in general. Tatars, I'm going to put them in the A tier. I'm going to bump them up a little bit. I actually had them in A- tier, but executive decision, I'm going off script. Just kidding, this thing isn't scripted. Can't you tell? I don't know, I like Tatars, man. Maybe this is just my step civ bias, but you have a really strong power spike with your free thumb ring. Even in Imperial Age, you get free Parthian tactics, which can be nice against archer civs. Your longer-lasting sheep is pretty handy. It means you can just delay going to farms, which means you can go for more men-at-arm heavy play more comfortably, because being able to afford like an early archery range and plopping down those farms is like the big sort of hiccup in your early game resource flow, if that makes sense. And you have great cav archers. Great Hussars. Kashik is an amazing unique unit. There's a lot to like with this civ. They have terrible infantry. Yeah, you have halberdiers with squires, which is like your only semi-good point, but it is definitely the weak point of the civ, and they miss a bit more of a like long-term eco bonus, but it's not the end of the world. I still think that Tatars are they're just a good all-around civ, and one that I'm certainly happy rolling on Arabia any day of the week. All right, we're going to try our best to get this video under an hour and 5 minutes in the recording, and hopefully editing will bring that down to under an hour. But still, we have Teutons who are going to be going in the B- tier. If you can play to the strengths of Teutons, you are still going to be doing just fine. If you can force fights onto your, super tanky, powerful army, then you will crush, most civilizations. It's just a matter of being outmaneuvered on Arabia, which is just an open map, right? So you don't love facing cav archers, you don't love facing just super fast armies of just cavalry units or even eagle warriors running around everywhere. But if you can sort of creep across the map, use your good economy, you can still smash your opponent's civilization. It's just especially ranged units can be a bit trickier, and the strengths of this civilization lend themselves more to closed maps than to open maps, which is fine as a general principle. It's just this isn't really where Teutons shine. Turks. So Turks going to also be going in B- tier. They are again a civ that is more suited towards closed maps. But you still have the faster working gold miners. Your scouts getting extra pierce armor is super handy in the early game, which is really needed because you don't have elite skirmisher, which is really, really painful in early castle age. But still, you have options. You have great cav archers, you have good gunpowder, and strong hussars, camels as an option as well, cavalier. you get a lot of choices with this civ. Your eco isn't the best, but at least you have the faster working gold miners, and you have a very strong tech tree. Lots of good options. I mean, compared to like Portuguese, Turks have like way better light cavalry and cav archers. And they both have like the gold discounts, which is kind of why I was comparing them. I also like Janissaries on Arabia a little bit more than organ guns. And then you get like free chemistry for bombard cannons in Imperial Age, which is really handy. So yeah, it's just, you don't have pikemen and elite skirmishers. It's always the bane of Turks, right? But you can still make them work. Vietnamese, we're almost there, guys. We have a lot of civs in the game right now. A- tier. Kind of underrated in my opinion. I mean, they are good at what they do, and what they do is archers, and they're good at killing archer civs, which there are a lot of that are highly rated here. You have the eco upgrades that don't cost any wood, solid early to mid-game eco bonus, you have a strong military bonus with your archery range units getting extra HP, that does apply to cav archers, you get another extra 10 to 12 HP on your cav archers and heavy cav archers, which only miss Parthian tactics otherwise, so that does give you a mobility option, which something like Britons and Ethiopians do not have. But your own archer play isn't like as strong as these two civs, in my opinion. So that's like where it all balances out. But your cavalry is just pretty decent in general. You just have a fairly flexible tech tree, solid economy, and Imperial skirmishers in the late game are really sick, and they can do a number on a lot of different units. So yeah, and rattan archers, like you mass a bunch of rattan archers, then you're good to go in a lot of situations. So I think Vietnamese, solid A- tier option. And that leaves us last but not least, the Vikings, who are also going to be in the A- tier. And I mean, yeah, they don't have thumb ring anymore, but their infantry play is a little bit better. Your economy is fantastic. You can still hit those really deadly timings with like fast imp arbalests, still go for your siege rams, still go for your berserks, which are much stronger in mid-game. And your feudal age play is a bit better in general. And I mean, Vikings, they're just a very straightforward civ, right? You can really leverage that eco in almost any way that you want and go to town. And that, guys, is my June 2022 1v1 Arabia tier list. Hope you all enjoyed. Definitely leave a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How you would rank these civs. But remember that this is a very short tier list. Like, this only goes down to C tier. So the actual difference between these civs is, I think, fairly minor. So when we're looking at between all of these different tiers, it's really, really nuanced. And that's just something that I hope you guys have kept in mind throughout the video. But regardless, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.